And welcome back to Morning Cafe time from this for the State of Affairs discussion. Ben Kinuthia joins me this morning. We also still have Steve on standby to weigh in on the stories that are making headlines. I mean, Steve has weighed in on some of them as we were taking a look at the stories and also the newspaper review. But then again, they're subject to being expounded some more. So it's time to take a comprehensive look at these particular stories. And one of the biggest topics that I've chosen this morning is on the Baba's homecoming or coming back. I mean, this talk of Baba while you were away and everything. Looks like so much has told up in terms of the BBI in regard to, of course, the absence of Baba. Because if the report is ready, there was a deadline to beat. This was to be presented to President Uhuru Kenyatta, but it has not been presented. A few or some of the people within the task force arguing that maybe they needed extra time. So who's fooling who? Is it that they genuinely needed extra time, or they are ready with the report and now that Baba is not around, they decided to shelve it until he's back?
Wonderful. I think this being a constitutional review bill, is good to take time on it. This is not another, we are not trying to make a law on dumping of garbage across the road. We are trying to make, the BBI is about the Constitution of Kenya. It's about the supreme law of Kenya. And so my feeling is that if there is need to wait, if there is need to shelve it a bit, if there is need to make adjustment, it's important because Wanjiko, I mean, sometimes they come and say, Baba alitusomea akasema ni mzuri.
Right.
And so if we don't give the technical teams enough time to come up with something good, we might end up having a situation whereby we wake up the following morning and we have a shoddy bill and it's passed because there are Kenyans who believe that if a leader they believe in has read it for them, it is good.
And true to what you say, it is important that we delve deep into understanding this because the reason why we're talking about a referendum, constitutional changes, is because Kenyans were blind to the fact that, there was a constitution that they needed to read, or even if they were not blind, they just decided, like you say, Baba is going to read it through for us. And today, we point fingers at the people who crafted this particular constitution on the many loopholes that are within the 2010 constitution. Steve, coming to you, one then would ask, we are facing the aspect of timelines. Remember, the likes of Orengo, who again are key, and Baba, they were saying that if at all we have to go for a referendum, if at all we have to go for a constitutional change through the ballot, then this should be done as early as July. We're at July. We can say COVID-19 is here. But do you suppose if COVID-19 was not here, then probably we'd be facing a referendum this month?
Well, number one is that a constitutional review process is not just a very random process. And I find the comments by Senator Orengo to be quite random, considering it was not just a process to ratify what the BBI Task Force Committee really recommended. I think there has been one big mess that has been made, and that is the individualization of this BBI, or rather, which is a constitutional review process. I think we need to as Ben is saying, we need to look at the key issues pertaining to this constitutional review. I think we need to go back and look at documents such as the TJRC that actually recommended so many things that need to be changed in this constitution. However, we have been taken by this kind of wind and BBI wave, where we are only looking at the issues of expanding an executive. I think it is time that Kenyans really look for that opportunity to create the constitution that was not created back in 2010. We need to create a better EACC that has prosecutorial powers, something that was recommended by TJRC. We need to look at more key issues other than the expanding of the executive. And I think the fact that the BBI, a document that had over 150 pages, had a lot that was in there, but we have only focused on a few segments. But I want to say that even if we were on a normal schedule, I don't think we would have had that referendum by July or even by August. That's why I think once this report was to be taken back to the president and Raila Odinga, who are the initiators of this process, we needed to now have the kind of a Bomas of Kenya sitting where we get all stakeholders to come up and really debate this kind of process before we can come up with a final bill. I think coming up with a final bill just out of the BBI task force will be so random. It would have been so random because a constitutional review process needs to involve all Kenyans. We need to go through a rigorous and a vigorous public participation all over the country. I think it should have been a process that needs to take even over a year, so that once we are done with this process, we will have fixed the constitution once and for all. So I think it is not something that should have taken such a short time. Even if we went through the parliamentary way of amending it and of course eventually the referendum, we will need time to have that bill become prepared, go through public participation, get to parliament and get approved so that we can have a referendum. So I think even if we were on a normal schedule, that a referendum should of course have happened maybe early next year or towards mid next year.
As we speak of this, Steve, which is something that is commendable, so to speak. But one would ask Ben then, I mean, if we talk of a situation where this should be a lengthy process, like we should take time before we get to this, I mean, are we really okay being treated to this politics of BBI? Because when you look at them, in as much as they're genuine towards addressing the issues of Mwananchi, I mean, at some point they get polarized. At some point they bring a lot of animosity and, lack of unity amongst the people who are of dissenting voices and all that, or, ascending voices. So when you take a look at such a scenario, do we genuinely need to have these talks for the longest of time, even as the 2020 referendum bill is proposed, that probably we should push this to a time where we'll carry the two, the elections and equally the referendum at the same period? Sincerely speaking, is that what Kenyans need?
Wonderful, wonderful. Come to think of it, I'll give you a perfect example. Nairobi Metropolitan Services has been with us for 100 days. The County Governments Act has not changed. The Constitution has not changed. We are experiencing better roads, better services. I saw people in Mukuru kwa Jenga are getting water. It tells you that when you want to provide leadership, it does not matter. President Moi Kibaki ruled us under a very archaic constitution. Actually, he ruled under the same constitution that Moi ruled us. But there was a huge difference. In fact, if anything, we experienced a lot of growth. Everybody agrees that President Kibaki was a good president. The circumstances under which he led us notwithstanding, he was an excellent leader. He tried
excellence based on the comparisons that are on the table.
He did a lot. He did a lot. And you can imagine one day he woke up and said, we have free primary education. And 1 million children went to school. The constitution had not changed. Nothing had changed. But a leader came and decided we have free primary education and 1 million children went to school. What I'm trying to say...
But just how much can the leadership do in knowing very well that we are abide so much on the rule of law and we seek so much to uphold the constitutionalism? There are times that, you find that leaders would come up with ideas and somebody else would come in to counter that. And we've seen numerous court battles as people try to counter what it is that has been proposed by the government and, other leaders.
And that's why I gave you an excellent example. Our roads in Nairobi are looking better. What constitution has changed? What law has changed? What we need to do is to have the right people in positions of leadership. But for as long as the same people who took us for a referendum in 2005 are the same people who are taking us into another referendum, because the people who told us, yes, this is a good constitution, are the ones who are telling us, no, this is not a good tentative constitution today, let us change it. They're the same people who brought devolution. They're the same people who said that if we bring monies and services closer to the people, things are going to be okay. Today, they are in Senate. Today, they are trying to impeach governors and Senate, and they are trying to show us that this constitution is not working and devolution needs to be changed, and we need to change the structure of the executive. Yet, I was lucky. At the age of 21, 22, I sat at Bomas of Kenya. I was the only observer on behalf of the youth under the auspices of the Kenya Youth Parliament. So we sat there and we know how this constitution was drafted. I would not advocate for the Bromas direction again. I can tell you, we had so many delegates. I don't remember how many there were, about 2,000 delegates, eating chai and mandazi and tea and having allowances. In fact, they were even being given money because they were staying in hotels all over Nairobi for a whole 3 months. We wasted a lot of money trying to make a constitution, which again was rubbished because even the final draft that we went into the 2005 referendum was different from what was created at Bomas of Kenya.
So is that a light way of saying that this leadership is not interested in the issues of the common man? It is interested in bringing on board seats and creating space for themselves?
There's a Major General, Badi, who has been able to take water to Mukuru without regard for what law is existing today. So all I'm trying to say, if these leaders wanted to serve us, if these leaders wanted to build roads for us and hospitals, and the things that matter to Mwananchi, by the way, is not who is president or what powers the president has. The things that matter to Mwananchi is that I can hang my clothes outside and in the morning find them on the clothesline because there's security. The things that matter to Mwananchi is that if I'm bitten by a snake, the nearest dispensary will be able to treat me and I come back home without necessarily being admitted because of a snake bite or having to have to roam so many kilometers. That if my wife is pregnant today, she can deliver at a nearby hospital and get the best standard of care and come back home. For such services, we do not need a constitutional
But just how much power does Mwananchi have? Maybe we should loop in Steve on this briefly. Steve, as we get to wind up on this topic, picking up from Ben's argument, sort of makes so much sense. But how much power or how much has Mwananchi executed his or her powers towards ensuring that whatever it is that we need is what we get? Because when we are subjected to a referendum, it means we have the power to vote yes or no. It means we have the power to say yes to these leaders or no to these leaders and register our interests. How much involved have we been on this, and how genuinely have we been with ourselves on the issues that we need addressed?
Before I answer that, just to support Ben, number one is that I forgot to say that 90% of the BBI recommendations are in existing laws. About all recommendations on the corruption, anti-corruption measures that have been recommended by the BBI are all in the ASECA, or what we call the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act. So, number one is that just to support that we don't need a referendum to improve service delivery. It is upon the leadership of the country to improve on how they do things. They didn't really need a constitutional amendment to introduce the CAS posts, which are not part of our constitution. So that tells you, if the government wants to do anything to improve on its service delivery, then it has all the relevant acts, it has all the necessary legislation to do that. Now, about whether the people have really played their part in shaping the kind of a country they want. Number one, I have always emphasized on one thing. What is democracy? A government by the people, for the people, by the people. It has been, citizens have been convinced to note that it only ends after they vote. That democracy is all about them voting. But I disagree. Democracy is about Kenyans sitting on the dinner table, Kenyans sitting on the decision-making table and having a stake in the decisions that pertain them. And how can we do that? That is why this constitution brought the aspect of public participation. But what we have found is that government departments, while passing laws, while doing the kind of things they do, they have had choreographed or kind of stage-managed public participation forums. For example, talking of the BBI and the kind of the final recommendations that we had. I was in Nyeri County when we had that BBI public participation. I wanted to enter, but that kind of forum was only for those invited members in a very high-end hotel. So what does that tell you? That the public has never been given that opportunity to really participation in making the decisions, the very decisions that concern them. So I think the Kenyans have always been, interested in participating in that decision making. But has government followed the constitution and the requirements of public participation to involve the public in every action, in every policy, and in every budget making process? Yes, they involve the citizen, but is it sufficient? So I think it is time the citizen comes out, and I want to say that the biggest office and the most powerful office is the office of the citizen. So I think it is time that we challenge the Kenyans, that it is time you come out and know your power, that the sovereignty of this constitution rests upon you as citizens. So come up and take your power and let the leaders know that they are accountable to you.
All right, and of course that's interesting. I think we're going to drop out on that because, well, it remains, a question that are they accountable to us? Are they able to proceed and make the best of the country, oblivious of the existing constitution or the constitution that we're trying to front? And that aside, we come to counter, while others are talking about BBI, Deputy President William Ruto is out here trying to woo the hustler nation, something that he's been doing anyway, constantly, of course, on the church arambis and everything. And now that people are not gathering in churches, he decides that he's not going to let go of his people. The people, of course, that we are talking about, the hustler nation in quotes. And he's been out here dishing goodies, giving them, donating shoe shining stands, donating laundry machines, donating saloon items, tailoring items, machines, water tanks, welding machines, name them. This is a good move or not? And is it a way of trying to raise his strategy or raise his profile come 2022?
I think we always miss the mark. We have a way of always missing the mark. The deputy president holds an office that is got the capacity to empower the people of Kenya permanently.
Okay.
By this I mean, sometimes I see where I live, a lorry comes and there is a mention of the deputy president and they've come to give water. And why they want to give water in a Bowser is because they can brand the Bowser.
Yeah.
If they put for you underground water that comes in pipes, they can't brand underground pipes. It will not have the DP's photo on it.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. In Mukuru kwa Jenga, I keep referring to the Major General. He has sunk a borehole and put in a tank. A borehole will cost about 3 million shillings, and the whole thing maybe 5 million in total. But the former governor, because I call him former, in me he doesn't exist, will buy a lorry worth 10 million, a double wheeler at the rear, I mean actually 10 wheels in total.
And label it.
And label it Sonko Rescue Team, so that he can perpetually come and give you water. Then he becomes a demigod. You have to keep depending on him. It's like manna coming from heaven. So he comes and gives you water. So you kind of worship him because he can brand it. But a person who thinks thoroughly will realize that instead of having 10 water bowsers going round, if Mukuru you give them one borehole and it sorts their problem, then that's a leader who wants to empower.
But let's face it.
And what the DP is doing, what the DP is doing,
Right.
giving out people car wash machines and all these kind of things. Ask, where is it happening the most? Nairobi and Central Province.
Okay.
Why is he not giving the people of Eldoret and Uasin and where he comes from?
Okay.
It's because he's looking for political mileage where he thinks he doesn't have adequate political mileage.
But are we not the very same people who've made it this way? That, you know, if you have to get a vote from me, then you have to give something at the end of the day. Imagine a scenario whereby you will just come and dig these boreholes and you know, just play underwater and people are able to get the benefits without them knowing that it is you. Would they go ahead and vote you? If you have interest, and you know, at the end of the day, in as much as we say that these are politicians, they're human before that. They have their own interests. If you want to be a politician, then you have to shine in your own respective way.
Everything is attributable to someone.
Okay.
Trust you me, when you do a certain road, even if you don't name it under you, people still, like now we have the western, the bypasses. Most of them were done by the Kibaki administration.
Yeah.
He did not call them Mwai Kibaki Road, though he had the opportunity to call them, just like the late Jomo Kenyatta named everything, including close to a public toilet to his name. But Kibaki, people still see Thika Road. In fact, people were pleading with him to name it after himself. He refused. We still attribute Thika Road to Emilio Mwai Kibaki. What I mean is, when you do a good thing, Kivutha Kibwana is doing lots of interesting stuff in Makueni, including all the stuff he's doing there. And we have not seen any project that has his name on it. Yet people still associate those projects with him. I think when you do your work and do it well, it does not matter whether you get the credit for it.
Thika Road, for instance, courtesy of the Nusum Kati at some point, also government. And Mwai Kibaki retires, goes home well, with no interest on matters politics ever again. But then again, we have Right Honorable Raila Odinga, who was part of this government at some point in time. I mean, don't you think it would only be fair if he would associate himself with in black and white and make it clear that I was part and parcel of this project for his political interest? Maybe we should loop in Steve to hear his sentiments on the same. Steve, I mean, we have, do you suppose then as a people, we're the ones who've probably just painted it at that point or brought it to that point whereby if you have to get something from me in form of a vote, then my friend, you have to be willing to give something at least?
I want to support a previous comment that you made, Linda.
Yeah.
And when you asked, have citizens really known their power or what kind of role they have in the government? I think it is ridiculous that politicians will always want to intervene and with cosmetic, solutions when they are needed, just to make a name out of it, while the sole responsibility to have fixed that problem permanently lied on them. I think what we have seen the deputy president doing, and not just the deputy president, even other elected leaders, coming and wanting to be on the front line of making donations, being seen to be on the front line of identifying with the poor. I think it is time the people realize their power. That if you bring us, a tank of water, we can tell you, take it back. What we want is tapped water directly to our homes.
Okay.
What we want are boreholes that have sustainability. I think, as I say, the greatest office, and that is the office which has been mostly underutilized, is the office of the citizen. Because it is the most powerful office. And I think it is time that citizens started asking hard questions. And I think even as we talk of BBI, the greatest need that we need right now is to implement the current constitution. But even before we implement it, let us talk about something called civic education. It is time that we embarked on a very serious civic education. We have that the president having issues, for example, when he went to Kiharu constituency, and he was telling Nyoro, the MP for there, that when the MP asked Uhuru to help him, rebrand the kind of classes and the kind of school that was there. And we had the president telling him, you have your CDF, but do the citizens know who has the sole responsibility on classes? Who has the sole responsibility on providing me water? What is the responsibility of the county government? What is the responsibility of the MP, the MCA, and the national government? I think what we need very highly to be done right now is a very serious process of civic education to enlighten the people, so that the people know their power. That if you bring me a few goodies, I am going to push them away, and I am not going to accept that, because you have a responsibility to give me better and sustainably. So I think having also monitored the voting patterns of the people, they are easily lured, by handouts and by temporary solutions. So I think it is time the people realize their power and demanded for long-term solutions.
I wouldn't want to believe that Kenyans do not realize their power, Ben. I wouldn't want to imagine that today I do not know how much power I hold right now, because we've seen how actively youths now getting into politics and trying to understand, the system of governance, understand the constitution, what it requires of us. Do you suppose it is the case, or it's just the fact that Kenyans are in dire need because of the situations at hand of, short-term solutions as opposed to long-term solutions? Because as it stands, if you tell me a long-term solution that will take forever, probably I will have died by tomorrow. So just give me what it is that you can give me right now, and then I'll figure out life tomorrow.
Short-term needs, I agree. Sometimes it comes, if we had good leadership, it's the kind of leadership that will tell you, we're giving you a tank in the meantime, but we shall fix the water problem moving forward. When a leader comes and gives you a tank, to start with, it's a sign that he has failed. Because a successful car wash is not the one that is able to store 10,000 liters of water. A successful car wash is one that knows if I open my tap tomorrow, it will have water. So by the time a leader is giving you a tank, what he's trying to tell you is, I have failed in making water run through the taps throughout continuously, and therefore I'm trying to cover my failure by giving you a tank so that it can, if it was somebody else who is not in government giving a tank, I would understand. Because that's a person who's in government has failed. Let me help young people with a tank, for example. But when you come as the leader of government and you decide that you're giving people a tank, it means you're telling them, I have failed in making water flow to your taps, so I'm trying to cover for my failure by giving you a tank. This thing of giving ladies machines for the salon and don't know to do hair and everything is not so bad. But unfortunately, the bulk of the time, the youth who are ignored are young people who have gone through a system of education and graduated and so on and so forth. And when you come and ask them, okay, for the very vulnerable youth, you're giving them a machine to do the hair for the ladies. But let me ask you, have you considered that we have graduate young people who, if you give a salon machine, it's not going to help them. And they've been home for 5 years and they've tried and they've failed. And that's where the government needs to come in and tell us why we're importing toothpicks and why we are doing so many other things that if we stop doing, they would help the graduate young person to become successful.
Whichever way you want to look at this, Ben, it's obvious that it's a change of tact on the DP side on matters politics. Do you suppose then it's going to be a plus or a minus for him?
I suppose right now people are opening their eyes. It's a huge minus for him.
Oh, yeah?
Because this same person is running businesses. We've heard of hotels being closed. Weston is not an exception. Where are his members of staff?
Yeah.
We've heard that members of staff for some of these places that are run by him are languishing. I wish he started by thinking, okay, in the empire of businesses I run, I have employees who are not able to feed themselves.
Yeah.
And call all the people who first work under him. And they feel bad when they see him giving thanks and all those sorts of things. And they who used to work for him are home and cannot feed their families. I think charity begins at home. If I were him, I would first think of what businesses do I run? Call all the people who've been retrenched from the businesses that I run and first give them something. Food, all those stuff that they need to be able to take care of their own families. Maybe even small monies for rent and all. Now that shows you care, but I can't live here. Let's say I run a butchery and I'd sack 5 members of staff. But because I want to be MCA in my area, I'm going all over the place, giving out handouts to people in my ward. Yet the people I sacked from my butchery here cannot be able to feed their families. So it goes to tell you what kind of a person he is, that political mileage is more important than the humanitarian face of life.
Okay.
It should have started with, I used to run a butchery. I have 5 members of staff who've gone home because I'm not able to pay them because business has gone down courtesy of COVID. And if business has gone down, it is my primary duty to first think of my 5 immediate employees. But when I start giving avocados to the whole ward because I want to be MCA and I have forgotten these 5 people, then it shows that I do not have a human heart.
And there you go.
Have a politician's heart.
We're not going to delve deeper into that. We only wait to see what will play out. But now that you brought about the aspect of COVID-19, I think that should be the next thing that we're discussing as we take a look at this report that was presented by TIFA that says mental health is on the rise courtesy of COVID-19. We have also had cases of complaints that nurses have succumbed to COVID-19, the frontline workers, the people whom we have bestowed our lives on their hands. The education sector is in limbo today as we speak. The tourism industry faces a situation where it will need long time to ensure that there's recovery that is going to be experienced ahead. Where are we? Where do we stand in the fight against COVID-19? Yes, we'd want to equate ourselves with a global fraternity. But remember, at the end of the day, it is Kenya and Kenya alone before we think of how the rest of the world is equally suffering with this.
Interesting. Linda, we are not able to speak about COVID-19 comfortably. Because in the US, they are able to make calculations and say, at this rate of infection, we speculate by November we'll have this number of infections and this number of people sick. And we are able to treat this number, so we might lose X number of human lives. Now, in Kenya, we have a super body. We have a super body that's interesting in the sense that, first and foremost, it's been taking a lot of sugar that is contaminated. It's taking a lot of, milk that has aflatoxin. The Kenyan body is not normal. Even our meat has got something called SMS. So now, when you start calculating on the possibilities of how to deal with COVID-19, you're dealing with a very special body. Today, I took some tea that had some sugar and I believe it had some mercury. So I don't even know whether my memory is working perfectly because they say memory is lost when you take a lot of mercury. So this is a human body that's supposed to be dealt with and you plan for COVID-19, but with Kenyan bodies that have been experimented with so many things. So it's not possible for us to give an accurate position, but all we can say, it will come the Kenyan way, we will deal with it the Kenyan way.
All right, Steve, there you go. And as we talk of the effects of COVID-19, I think the biggest talk right now is on how best we get to recover, how best we deal with the situation at hand, because arguments, different people have argued otherwise, that in as much as maybe we've had restrictions, trying to tame COVID-19, they probably have not been very successful in achieving this. Do you suppose they've not been successful, or maybe the situation would have been worse? And now moving forward, we need to re-strategize and think deep if at all we are to be successful in this fight.
First of all, I want to really appreciate
All right. Okay.
I have seen the kind of numbers. Right now we have about 4,500 people who have been confirmed. And we have approximately 45% of those confirmed patients having recovered fully. So I think, first of all, I wish to say that we are not doing badly, or rather, I can also submit that the coronavirus did not hit us that badly. Because looking at the kind of figures that we have so many patients who are really not showing the kind of strong symptoms that we have seen there abroad. So looking at Kenya, I think we have we need to address something about mental health. I want to just take you back through the past 1 week. We saw a woman who killed her own, was it 3 children?
Yeah.
We also saw yesterday, 4. Yesterday in my home village, you must have read it in the papers.
Yeah. We've lost him, but I think he raised a pertinent point right here. And you are equally a mentor. You deal with lots of people, in terms of their status socially and all that, and paints a picture of how tough things have been. While we might say, like he says, that COVID-19 has not hit us as bad in comparison to other nations across the world, but reality is that the aftermath, the after effects of it, the restrictions that have been put on board in regards to the same, have brought us to a point whereby we are crying even more because of the number of people we're losing, the number of the divorce cases that we're experiencing today, the number of mental illnesses that have cropped up as it stands today. Where does it place us? And I mean, what does this mean? What should we do moving forward?
I do not know whether it's the numbers that have increased or it's the coverage of the numbers that has increased.
Okay.
Because there are two things that could have happened. One, it could be true that the number of cases has increased. And it could also be true that there has been more highlight and focus on those cases. Because what has happened, there has been less political rallies. There has been less focus on what's happening in the field of politics. And a lot more focus on what's happening in families and homes. And so if you ask me, sometimes maybe what could have happened, because there's been a lot of stay at home. There's been a lot of stay at home. It could have been possible that at some point, because people were staying at home, they were focusing more on what they are seeing around, as opposed to what the media was constantly feeding us on the TV, that is what's happening. But having said that, it's unfortunate that a mother would give birth, raise, and then eventually kill these children.
But as a mentor, maybe I'll need to ask you this. And I think I don't want to justify what this mom did. But I, as a mother, would sit down and imagine a scenario where my little boy would be going through tough times, and there's barely nothing I can do. It is beyond me. Do you really want to sit down as a mother and look at them suffer and cry to you? Or you probably would find a way of getting yourself from that torture. Well, not knowing that you're landing yourself into more torture.
I think this is one unique case that needed attention, and it did not get attention at the point where the attention was needed. And unfortunately, maybe the person who would have come to help was delayed by a day because he was trying to put together some cameras so that when he donates food to these families, he seemed to be the one who is donating those foodstuffs. I think it's unfortunate, and as a mentor, one thing that I usually tell people is that there's no situation that is completely permanent. And sometimes it's not shameful to cry out for help. I wish that women walked out on the streets and went to the chief's camp and said, if you don't give me food, I'm going to kill these children. I don't think those children would have died. Even if she went to a tarmac road and knelt on the road, there you do a demonstration and sat there and said, no, if you people don't give me food, I'm going to kill my children. Those children would not have died. Or even if she wrote a poster and walked on a road and said, if I don't get food today, I'm going to kill my children. Without
being labeled?
What would have happened is people would have come. People would have, maybe they first thought she's a mental case, but she would have gotten help. So usually say, whenever you're in a bad situation, the first thing you should do, before you think of hating yourself, because it's natural, it's very human, that when you get to a point where you feel like the world is not interested in you anymore, you hate yourself. But when you raise up your hand, when you cry for help, when you say honestly, I need help, people come. I have seen people even do it on social media. You wake up and say, I have never begged on social media, but my house is going to be locked tonight. Please, if you can, help me. If you're not able to, a few people will come and say all sorts of ugly, but some people will go to your inbox and they'll help you. So the first thing you need to know, anytime you're in a bad situation, I can tell you as a mentor, raise up your hand and say, I'm in a position where I'm not able to get myself out. Please come to my help. Because this woman, I'm sure, has brothers, she has sisters, she has uncles, she has cousins. And these children have people they call uncles. They have people they call even teachers in school. If she had just thought, okay, wait, or even tell these children, go to your teacher, tell your teacher that we are starving here, or go to your uncle, or go to, This would have been something.
I think the argument then would be...
So the best thing is raise up your hand, and always say, I'm in a situation that I can't get myself out. And it's normal. And people will come in and help.
After all, what is the worst that can happen? If you have the guts to kill, then you have the guts to borrow.
They'll laugh at you, one or two.
But for how long?
The bulk of, 2-3 people will help you. And one day you'll be back on your feet. And they will need you, and you will help even those who laughed at you.
All right. This extends to the level of, the frontline workers, who, again, we've had talks on how best they can be looked into, or they can be catered for matters mentally and all that. Because, the things that they see today are things that, are not so good. At least these are the people who have had the chance to see the people who have COVID-19. Even as Kenyans continue saying that, or doubting the fact that, this case is anyway or not. So when you see frontliners, people who deal with these cases day in, day out, and not just cases of COVID-19, but of course generally health sector at large, they also face difficult times. The reports that are coming on board is that there's no proper care. And I think we touched on this in the morning briefly, but I'll bring it back to you, Steve, once more. Look at the nurses, and now that there are reports that some of them have succumbed to COVID-19, something that the government has disputed. Whom should we trust? The unions? Is it the government? And where does it place the lives of the frontline workers?
Before going to that, I was raising quite an important point on the current traumatizing season that we have. I was saying that we have really traumatized people, and that is why we are seeing all this killing. Why is it? It is because people are having a lot of stress and there is a lot of uncertainty. And I just wanted to raise an issue on how effective is the economic stimulus packages that we've seen the president releasing recently. How effective is the cash transfer program for those who have been vulnerable, those who are unemployed? I think it is time that the network of the assistant chiefs and the administration, which is responsible for identifying those people who are really vulnerable during this period, they should step up their game. And you see, the people like this woman, if the administration through the local sub-chiefs and all that would have identified that this is a family that has 4 children and this is a person who is not earning, then we need to address that through this cash transfer program. We can have her in the list. And we have cases of people who are really vulnerable, missing out of such list, and people who are relatives or close friends of those who are, really presenting such lists, being considered. So I think we really need to also consider and ask about the effectiveness of these cash transfer programs. Are they addressing the key issue? Because all this trauma and mental health, including to our health workers, it is all about money. Let us not really have a lot of, go about it. The most important issue, it's about having food on the table. So let us also address our frontline health workers and ensure that they are getting better pay. About the kind of danger that they are going through and the kind of risks, and there are reports that about 2 have died, but the government maintains that none has died. I think, and I want to insist that the kind of money we are receiving from COVID, let us focus quite a huge amount, to ensure that each of our frontline health workers has a good or a sufficient supply of PPEs, and that is quality PPEs. We've seen some PPEs, we've seen some health workers say that some of the PPEs that are being supplied to them are actually not quality. So I think by supplying quality PPEs to our health workers, it is the only way that we can be able to assure our health workers that we care about them. And as well, as they really commit themselves to this fight against coronavirus, I think there is one very, disappointing thing that we have done to these health workers. We've seen the government say that they lack, that yes, we are testing, but we lack the reagents to really confirm these tests and say if these tests are negative or positive. I think with the kind of, having solved the issue of human resource and having sufficient health workers handling this virus, it is also necessary that the government steps up to ensure that the necessary resources, including the PPEs, the reagents, the drugs and all things that are needed to support the medical field are there, so that we are able to fight this virus appropriately.
All right, and crossing over to matters education also, I know you'd want to weigh in on, of course, the role of the frontline workers and how best they would be catered for. But even as you do that, I would want to consider, teachers as also key essential caregivers. That's for sure. In as much as this time around they are at home, and the education sector is in limbo. And when we're talking about the education being in sector being in limbo, we talk of what this means for the teachers, what this means for the parents, what this means for the students out there. And the government teachers, or maybe the public teachers at least, are probably being paid right now. What about the private teachers who highly depend on the fact of the existence of students in school, so that at least they're able to make something? But for how long again will the government be paying, the public teachers in the event that students do not resume classes anytime soon?
COVID is a great equalizer, if you ask me. For a long time, teachers in public school looked up to teachers in private school because of what they earn and the benefits they get. Now the teachers in private schools are looking up to the teachers in public schools and saying, you're earning, we are not earning.
Yeah.
The government should not have an excuse for not paying teachers during this period, because we are not in school. Children are not in school. It means, therefore, that there is no money going to books, there's no money going to so many things that run the education sector.
Okay.
So even if it means them paying the teachers until January next year, they have the money to do so. There should be no excuse.
Okay.
The government contributes part of tuition fees, especially for secondary school and even primary school. That's why we call it free primary education. So if the government is not putting money into these schools today, they should be able to put monies into teachers anyway. Now, having said that, I also wish to say this, that COVID is a great equalizer because it has brought to the fore. Now Magoha has understood what it means to have 80 children in one class, 65, 75 children in one class. And they have the dilemma because they would have wanted their children to be in school, because the children of the MPs and our leaders have been totally cushioned from the effects of COVID-19 to the point that they can be able to reopen their schools and have 20 children in a class anyway. That's how it has been in private schools, maximum of 30. So they're not going to struggle much. But for government schools, they've realized that we need more classes. They've realized that the teacher-to-children ratio is very, very poor.
But I would say contrary also, because you realize that also it's a problem. Space is a problem for private schools, I will tell you for free. Because most of these entities actually do not have enough space in terms of the buildings and the facilities that they've put out. Some of them actually even have private schools in somewhere, somewhere in a flat. So you realize, and most of the parents have opted to take their children to private schools as opposed to public schools. So space is an issue, I would want to believe, even, and it cuts across.
In public schools, I think, and we must agree, that the bulk of our public schools still have enough space. What has happened is because you find someone who lives in Embakasi wants to take their child to a school on Ngong Road, and a person who lives in Kiambu Road still takes, I think the bulk of the beautiful schools are on Ngong Road. They want to take their children to schools on Ngong Road, and that causes a dilemma. But if you ask me, if this government wanted land for the railway and they got it and they compensated for it, if this government wanted land for schools, they would get land. In fact, the law still stands, the compulsory acquisition of land for public use. So they can get the land, they can expand on the land, they can build better infrastructure for our schools if they want to build infrastructure for our schools. Let them not give us stories that there's no space. How would a government not have land? After all our land, I'm telling you, if oil is discovered in a roundabout in CBD, that's when you realize that it's possible to get space to do anything that you want to do. So let us, you saw what happened in Turkana, somewhere that nobody was interested in. When oil was discovered, what happened? So for education, let us not give excuses. Let us get land if we have to get land. Let us compulsory acquire land if we have to get land, but let us have our children in schools.
And speaking of which, one of the key economic drivers, that is the tourism sector, is bleeding so hard. Reports coming on board is that the profits that have made so far, or this year, is about 30% of the profits that they would make on normal occurrences. How then do we craft the road to recovery for such an industry? Let's overlook the entire economy, because that's another huge discussion to make. But looking at the tourism industry that keeps, at least when you cut across, when you look around, the hospitality industry, which falls under this, is the only one that has been allowed to gradually reopen. Probably an acknowledgement by the government that indeed this is a key economic driver.
It is a key economic driver, but there comes a time when you realize that what funds tourism is not in a position to fund tourism anymore. The bulk of the countries from which we draw our tourists are being hit hard by COVID-19. So let us not lie to ourselves that it's going to be possible to revive tourism at this point in time. It may not be possible, because even if you want to, the people who are supposed to come, they are sick. They are unwell. We are trying to control the COVID-19 influx into the country. So that may not work well. But if you ask me what we could do, this is a beautiful time to raise our industry. Because what happens when you fail on one end, you start thinking on how to work on the other end. And our industries right now need a boost. This is the time when goods that used to come from China and India are not coming in as good as they used to. And this is the best time to start saying, oh, we've been surviving on our own toothpicks. We've been surviving on our own handkerchiefs. We've been now making our own muikos without having to import muikos from China. And if we do that and grow our industry, then we do not have to worry about whether or not tourism is so badly affected, because manufacturing can employ 5 times the number of people that tourism has actually employed. Yes.
Okay, well, there you go. And coming back to a different topic altogether, we take a look at the tussle that is ongoing right now in regards to matters of finance sharing and the Finance Bill 2019. Betting taxes dropped. President Uhuru Kenyatta officially signed that one. What do you make of it, and the fact that we're still grappling on how we're going to be able to, fix this and actually fund? Maybe we should start with Steve first. The Finance Bill 2019 already signed, and the betting industry or the taxes have dropped. I mean, generally, when you look at it, are we at a better position, or then we should brace ourselves for more troubles ahead as the taxpayers?
One area that actually created a lot of revenue to government is the betting industry. I want to give you some figures about how much the betting industry was making per year. Per year, we had about a turnover of 360 billion in the betting industry. That is more money than the one that is transferred to counties, all of them.
Wait a minute. Are you actively involved now that you have so much analysis and we always talk about the people who bet a lot? Are you one of of them?
No, not at all. I don't really bet, but or being a person who really looks at the economy and how it's faring, I want to tell you that a lot about every month, a state of about 180 million will be, you will be, deposited. And the betting industry is a very large industry. So what I think, and according to my opinion, is that number one, we need to bring back the team and SportPesa as much as it had really brought our young people, to really wasting their few resources that they get. But the kind of revenue that this industry generates, I don't think we need it. I don't think this is the time to really drop the kind of the taxes that we saw. We had the 20% tax on I think the return that will happen to those who bet. But I think we don't need to drop it. It is the time that we really need more revenue, considering the kind of fiscal deficit that we have of about 8.5%. It is time that anywhere where we can get more revenue, I think we don't need to drop that revenue. And I think that was an issue. I don't know why the members of parliament approved it. But I don't want to really, speak about the issue of SportPesa. But we also need to remember that even with this drop of the 20% tax, SportPesa and the team and a few other big betting companies have still not been given licenses. And we had Matiang'i yesterday say that they have still not decided to give them back their licenses until they comply with their guidelines. So I think that considering the kind of, you remember that the President Uhuru dropped VAT from 16% to 14%. And what that meant was that we lost about 45 billion in revenue. So considering the times we are in, I don't think this is the time to really drop taxes on this industry. It is the time to really consider those industries like betting that we can tax more and get more revenue. Let us tax.
Right, and speaking of which, I'll come to you. Remember very well that this tax that we're talking about on the sports book is what got a majority of the betting companies exiting the stage. So is this a positive move or a negative move towards, again, reviving the industry?
I don't think what killed the betting industry was the taxes.
Yeah.
The betting industry was not killed by the taxes. The betting industry was killed by the government realizing that young people were even betting their school fees.
Okay.
There are people who would bet even money for rent and food, and their families would be thrown out because someone has been betting and has not paid rent for 3 months and he's not told the wife that he's been betting in a sports site. So they just see auctioneers with a kufuli and people are thrown out. It had gotten to a point where we had irresponsible betting. Betting per se is not
reduced?
bad. Yeah.
After that?
Yeah, of course. You see, if a site is closed, it's closed. So you have to think about.
But there are very many others.
Yeah, but you see, advertising is powerful.
Yeah.
There are very many people in my generation who started smoking cigarettes because of the amount of advertising that was happening for cigarettes at that point in time. It was not regulated. So to a young mind, 16, 15, when they see how cool someone looks in a cigarette, they would think it's a nice thing and they would go into it. So it's the same thing with betting. They had gotten sports personalities and they were advertising like it's a malaria drug.
Okay.
And people were getting into betting thinking that it's the end of their problems. Information was not available in good amounts that betting has a blind side. Everybody looked at the beautiful side of betting, and that affected the economy seriously. Because sometimes people think that the economy only benefits when you tax. But if citizens are losing money to one big mogul, because all the money is going to one place, and a lot of them are losing money and they're becoming impoverished, then it's not a good thing.
Okay.
So it needed to be controlled. Betting is not bad. Earning from betting is not bad. But at the same time, you need to control. Otherwise, we shall have irresponsible. It's gotten to a point where young people don't want to work. I mean,
there are people who used to resign from the office. I'm 30, 40,000 and boom, you're taking betting. So now that this has been lifted, does it mean that we're going back to that scenario?
I think, there are people who are actually recovering from the effects of irresponsible betting as we speak. So even when the taxes, they've learned their lessons.
Right.
And we need to have ambassadors. In fact, at that point in time, we were coming up with a program as mentors and motivational speakers and inspirational speakers. And we had discovered that betting is a bigger cancer today than actually alcohol and substance abuse. That there are more young people in fact, Matiang'i gave us figures of 76% of young Kenyans are betting. So when you have 76% of a population betting, it's a dangerous affair. It's worse because even those people who are abusing drugs are not 76%. So we needed to get to a point where we start talking to young people in institutions of learning and telling them that it is possible to bet responsibly because betting will not die. It will not come to an end, but it has to be done responsibly.
All right. And Steve, I know you had some reservations. I'll allow you to weigh them in, but also ask these questions. In as much as this is being revived in a way, because that will be considered as a revival, how do we then do it while regulating and avoiding some of the effects that Ben is talking about?
I think, number one, looking at cigarettes and looking at alcohol, the fact that both commodities are dangerous and they are, not good for our health, it doesn't mean that the government really bans them. The kind of revenue that government generates from alcohol and cigarettes as sin tax is quite high. And so my opinion was that we really need to bring back the betting industry, because the betting industry really created very high revenues for government. But of course, reducing the taxes is not the way. One way to regulate betting is, number one, is to increase the kind of taxes that we have. And that tax that, you will have, that you would find that once you win, there is 20% on what you win. So that was one way to regulate. And I think the only other way that we really need to regulate is what Ben is saying. It is time that we also ensure that we really speak to our young people. It is time that we really focus on, mentorship and, mindset change to our young people. Because unless our young people change their mindset, they're never going to really, divert from betting. There are those local betting sites. There are those Chinese booths where, young people go and bet in mashinani. There are pools where young people still bet. There are still other existing sites where young people still bet. So I think by blocking the sporting industry, it is just like the way if you block, the EABL today, people will still look for alcohol. They are going to still go for, the local brews that are really done there. So I think what we need is to have a sensitization to young people. And I think it is time government stopped blaming, looking for blames on the reasons of unemployment. As much as it has really, caused laziness among our young people, it is time that government really address the issue of unemployment by promoting skills development among our young people. Because if our young people are empowered with skills, and they are empowered with jobs, then they are not going to really waste the little that they have on betting. If another aspect of mindset change and mentorship is also created. So I really support Ben that we really need to, have a lot of motivation of speaking to our young people. But even as we tell them to stop betting, let us also create alternative activities for them to engage in.
And of course, just like that, the 2020 finance bill was signed by President Uhuru Kenyatta. The very same President Uhuru Kenyatta at some point, remember, had declared or called upon the MPs to ensure that they wipe up gambling 101%. What informed the about turn or the change of mindset is something that is yet to be established. But most importantly, we have received that overview by Steve in regards to how the betting industry in a way had boosted the economy. If not boosted the economy, also helped the lives of few individuals who were betting responsibly for that matter. And speaking of which, now that we're talking matters finances, we had weighed in on this earlier on in regards to how tough times have been on balancing the budgets for different counties or for counties, allocation of funds and all that. So Ben, coming to you, this also was touched on the cartoon edition of the PD, that is the People Daily. And I was trying to understand what the cartoon speaks about, but clearly, it needs an extra mind. But for a few of us who've been following up on the finance issues that are being debated right now in Senate on how much every county should get, I think we can resonate and try and understand this. So what do you make of this cartoon edition, even as you speak of your position on the disbursement or the circulation and sharing of funds across different counties?
Wow, thank you. I think this captures what's happening in a way. But there's one debate I wish to bring to the table that many Kenyans are not looking at, and that is how much are counties collecting in the first place. Before we even talk about how much counties are being given, the one place they have never wanted us to address is how much they collect in a day. Because like Nairobi County, I believe they collect twice or thrice what they get from the national government.
Oh yeah?
And if that is happening in every other county, it means that we are giving these people 360 billion, but they are collecting $1 trillion in total. If this $1 trillion was put into good use, we would never even have to talk about allocation of money to the counties. These are counties that are charging people for burying them in cemeteries. They are charging people for owning a chicken. They have all sorts of crazy type taxes. If you own a vehicle today and you brand it TV47, it's branded for Nairobi. Jaribu wendo upark Machakos. That's when you know that you've not paid for branding in Machakos and Kisumu and Mombasa and so many other things.
So revenue is being collected.
It's so much money. If one vehicle would pay 18,000 for branding, and you know how many vehicles are branded. Motudho used to say that in that area called Umoja Inoko, that area there's 1,000 bars, and he was wise to say so. So if you had 1,000 bars and each is paying a license of 20,000, it means from those bars alone there's a revenue of about 200 million being collected. All I'm trying to say, Nairobi has admitted in parking fees they collect, I don't know, a lot of money. So all I'm trying to say is that let us first address the issue of how much money are the counties collecting before we talk of how much money we need.
And in the recent proposal, I think
it needs to become very transparent. In fact, if anything, Kenyans are overtaxed. I feel we should get to the point where only KRA collects revenue in all the counties. And then it's brought to one basket and then it's distributed across counties. We'll realize that these people have been stealing so much money from us.
And speaking of which, the latest proposal also has a clause where it indicates that maybe this money should be allocated based also on the level of muscles on how counties or different counties are able to collect revenue. So would you also be of the same idea, or would you be of the idea that probably we should just go by the general, regional, of course, aspect of it, because when we're talking about how big the number of the people within these particular counties, and that's how money should be allocated. Steve?
With the recent, what do you call it, the census, it really brought our figures down as a people. And what that meant is that we lost about 400 million in the total amount of money that is allocated to Nyeri County government. And I think that it is time Senate really reconsiders this issue of revenue allocation. I know that they have been debating this issue, and it is time that revenue allocation doesn't just have to be based on population. We need to look at other aspects that are key to revenue allocation, so that we can have a more equitable share. We need to look at the kind of economic activities that happen in that area. We need to look at how accountable has that county government been with the previous funds that have been disbursed to them. I think there are so many factors that need to be considered, while allocating revenue. And I also want to, speak about something that Ben said about own source revenue. I don't think the own source revenue is that high in other counties other than Nairobi. And I wish to commend county governments, because county governments have really stepped up on, increasing their share of the revenue, of their own source revenue. And it is a good step, because considering the kind of a budget that we usually now have, having a budget of about 3 billion and the kind of fiscal deficit that we have as a percentage of GDP, 8.5% is a very high percentage. And I think it is time the national government really also, relooks its budget to really bring that deficit to about 3%, because it is not really manageable, because we overborrow to spend on some of projects which I think are quite unnecessary. We overborrow to spend on quite high recurrent expenditure. And I think my opinion on how we spend money. Number one, devolution needs more money. I think as much as counties have their own source of revenue, in other counties like my county, it only amounts for about 20 or 15 or 18%, between 15 to 20% of the money that is disbursed by the exchequer. But I think that the government really needs to look at Wanjiko in terms of how they focus their budget. I think there was this issue where LPG in the previous recommendations, they were recommending to have tax on LPG and to only zero rate milk and bread. And members of parliament really opined that even flour should be zero rated, and we need to look at Monanchi in the finance bill. We need to see in a way, are we really empowering Monanchi to have a better purchasing power? Are we really dropping the prices of the products and commodities that Monanchi uses daily? Or are we overtaxing them to really focus the money on where they really don't need it urgently?
All right, pertinent questions raised right there. And gentlemen, I think on that very note, we'll leave them with the questions, because we can only propose, we can only give, what we think would be the right thing in terms of advice. But of course, the implementation squarely lies with the leadership. Ben, as we get to wind up, what would be your parting shots?
I think my parting shot is that this nation can become a better country if only our leaders are willing to make it a better country.
And there you go.
Before we go into changing any law and anything, let us just be willing to make this country a better country, and it shall become a better country.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. Steve, I think I'm okay if I say let's exit the stage before you give your parting shots. Or there's something that is burning you'd want to say?
I think I will just say that the future, I want to encourage our leadership, based on the discussions that we have had today. Let it be about the next generation and not the next election.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Ben Kinothia, who's a lawyer, and Steve Kijana. Steve Kijana, all the best also on the reforms that you're trying to bring on board and incorporating leadership, youthful leadership for that matter, and responsible leadership. We can only hope for the best if at all we want to make the best of the future of this country. And on that note, we wind up Morning Cafe's state of affairs segment. As we cross over to a different segment altogether, we'll be taking a look at matters health, and our main focus today on, of course, GB strep, and it is awareness month for the same. So we'll be taking a look at that session we had with a doctor, that is Dr. Chege. She'll be taking us through that as we get to understand some more on this particular condition. But that aside, also we have to revive or to just try and unravel something that is going to be making your Sundays interesting. I will not tell you what it is all about, but I'll ask you to hold it right there. After this break, I'll try to unravel that for you, and trust you me, you will not regret, because your Sundays are going to be different from this Sunday. After this break, we're back.